So the footy season's about to make its grand return in 2024, which of course means we need to sort out our predictions for the year. What's going to happen? Who's going to win? Who's going to be the worst team ever? And who's going to win all the major awards? So let's make some big predictions with absolutely none of the knowledge or expertise to really be able to make them. And let's see how many we get right. So I think before I even begin to say who's going to win the premiership, I think this is going to be another logjam year, sort of similar to what we saw last year. I think just about every team is going to improve in some form or another on their performances last year, which means it's going to be really tricky to predict how much improvement each side is going to have to jump over the sides above them. With that being said, I think you have to put Brisbane and Collingwood back at the top of the list, and I think Brisbane will win the premiership this year. I think they've just got the most dangerous forward line in the comp. I think with Daniher, Hipwood, and Cameron, another year of those three together, I think they should be even better. You know, Daniher and Charlie Cameron, they sort of steal goals from each other in terms of like winning the Coleman medal, but Daniher was still, I think, top 5 in the comp for goals last year. Cameron was still in the top 10 as well. I think both had 50 plus goals or 60 plus goals for the year. So Daniher had 61 goals, Cameron 59. Very, very potent forward line. They're going to be very dangerous. Hipwood another 40 plus goals. Add to that mix. They're going to be just as good, if not better, this coming season than they were last year. And I think their forward line just has them that little bit of an edge over the Magpies. So, runners up. Is it going to be Collingwood? Another grand final for them, another grand final loss. Obviously, they are the reigning premiers coming off the big win last year. Will they be up there again? I think it's going to be very hard to see anyone dethroning them this year. They've obviously had a terrific year. They've had the inclusion of Lachie Schultz sort of replacing that Jack Ginnivan role. Bobby Hill's only going to get better. A lot of their team is going to get better. The Dacos boys will get better. Aside from really like Pendlebury and Sidebottom in that super aging portion of their team, there's not really a lot of negatives in that Collingwood team. Except for what I highlighted in Brisbane is that the Collingwood forward line is, it's a bit makeshift, but it worked last year. It won them the grand final. They won't have Dan McStay this year, but they didn't have him in the grand final last year. So they should be able to use their forward line mix once again to be able to kick a winning score every week. They've got plenty of midfielders who push up and do it. Degoe's going to have a great year. They're going to be tough to beat. I think they'll be runners up to the Lions this year. But we don't want to be so close-minded as to say no one else is a possible chance here. I think the other contenders for the flag this year, the Giants, Carlton, and Melbourne. And despite Melbourne not winning a final for 3 years, I think they've still got enough in that team to be able to be a contender. You've still got Lever-May in the back line. Their forward line is a bit iffy if Fritsch and McDonald don't get going, although Van Rooyen could do something this year. And you've still got the midfield mix of Gawn, Petrarca, Viney, and Oliver, even with the loss of Brayshaw. And the Giants, you never know what they're going to come up with. They could be absolutely brilliant again this year. 1 point from a grand final last year. Could do one better. Carlton, I think, are the iffy one for me in those teams that I mentioned because Harry Mackay, I've already seen his inconsistency at goal has continued to carry over into the preseason. And are they going to get the same quality that they got out of their top-end players this year? Obviously, Cripps, I don't think he's going to get much better. I think Curnow had probably about as good as a year as he could have. Can he have another great year like that? They're going to need improvement from a lot of the other guys like Walsh, Chera. They're going to have to be the ones to lift this Carlton side up, and especially without Wiedering the first couple of rounds of the year. How is their back line going to go? I don't think anyone else can win the flag. That's it. As for the bottom of the ladder, I think the wooden spoon, sadly, will go back to the West Coast Eagles. I think they'll be an improvement on last year. They won't have as many absolutely horrible losses that they did have the last season, but I think this is going to still be a struggle for them. We'll like to see the breakout of Harley Reid this year, which should be good. I think he had 20 possessions in the preseason game yesterday, so he's on the move and hopefully could be a rising star contender, but I think West Coast, sadly, wooden spooners back-to-back. Speaking of the rising star, I'm not going to go with the bold choice of Harley Reid. I'm actually going to pick Riley Sanders, who plays for the Western Bulldogs. He looks like an absolute gun of a player. And if if he continues any sort of the preseason form that he had, he is going to be the absolute best player out of the draft crop. So Riley Sanders is my pick for the rising star this year. And let's go through the other major awards. The Coleman medal. Who do I have winning this? Well, it's another Western Bulldog. I think Jamari Ugelhagen is set for an absolutely huge breakout year. He's my pick to win the Coleman Medal this year. He's a player who's sort of teased us for a number of years. He's with Norton, sort of that tag team in the forward line, but I think this is the year he really overtakes Aaron Norton. Is it enough to get the Dogs in the top 8? I'm not too sure. I think they'll be around the mark, but as I said, I think there's going to be a big logjam, sort of from about 5 to 13. It's going to be very close. And then the Brownlow medal, I am going to pick maybe a potentially obvious selection here and go with Nick Dacos. He probably would have won it last year if he didn't get injured late in the year, and we had Lachie Neale win it, which was a bizarre choice in the end, I guess. Not that Lachie Neale didn't have a great year, just he sort of tends to get noticed a bit more than some of his other Brisbane Lion teammates in those wins. But I think Nick Dacos should win the Brownlow this year. Collingwood are going to win a lot of games. He'll be up there again. Probably Lachie Neale will be up there again because I think Brisbane will win a lot of games as well this year. But I don't really have anyone else who could be a standout. Maybe if I'm going for a smoky, maybe Toby Green. If the Giants win a lot of games this year, he'll certainly be up there. But I'm going with Nick Dacos to win the Brownlow in 2024. A couple of the more difficult predictions are the, who's going up and who's going down the ladder. I'm going to start with who's going down, and I think it's Port Adelaide. It's a pretty easy-ish choice to make, I think, at this point, given Port were third last year. They're obviously still going to be quite a good side this year. They've had a few inclusions come into their Radigalia, Zerk Thatcher, were a couple of those. Soldo, obviously, and Jordan Sweet were your other two recruits that came in through that trade and free agency period. Don't know how good their one-on-one defensive ability can be, but they do have a lot of guys now that can sort of drop off and take the intercept mark, especially Alir and Radigalia. That's sort of their forte. So I think that's why Port Adelaide, obviously they were third last year. They'll definitely be on the decline, but they could still make the top 8. I think there's still going to be that huge logjam in the middle of there, and they'll win plenty of games at Adelaide Oval. They've got tons there, and then they've got Gather Round as a bonus, so they should be good. And then the other side is actually really hard to predict who are going to be the teams to rise and make a bit of climb on the ladder. We saw actually last year, Carlton and GWS, they sort of had their rise late in the year. It wasn't early in the year. It was sort of around like 13, 14, they really started to string together wins to get them back into the finals. Carlton were eventually only one game outside of the top 4 after being in the bottom 4 about 8 weeks earlier than that. So it is potential that we could see the same thing happen with a side like the Gold Coast Suns. Obviously, they could be, quite poor at the beginning of the year, and as they sort of learn their system and improve, they could be one of the teams that sort of rise up the up the ladder and find themselves in the top 8 come the end of the year. Similar, I think, with the Adelaide Crows. They'll probably have a better starting point than the Gold Coast Suns, and they should be in the 8. They obviously should have been there last year. But then you got another side like Sydney who had like 3 or 4 recruits. But if we're going to just pick like 2 for this one, let's go Gold Coast and Adelaide are going to be the teams that will rise up and maybe make the 8. In fact, let's go for it. Let's say they're both going to be in the 8. Now, we've got through the major points of the year. We've just got a few little ones here to sort of fun crystal ball moments. The first one I'm going to come up with is what will be the biggest headline of the year, and I think they're going to be changing some rules around concussion. We obviously saw the retirement of Angus Brayshaw for the Ds, so I think we are going to see some concussion changes this season, and I think they're going to extend the time off period. It's obviously 14 days currently. I think that will be extended to 20 plus days, or is it? I think it's 12 days actually. 12-day layoff. I think that'll be extended to 20 plus days. We've obviously seen a few other retirements in the past, with Paddy McCartan being another one. We've seen some other players who have had some serious concussion problems as well. Nathan Murphy was a player who had a lot of guidance before recommitting to Collingwood this year, whereas you had Brayshaw, who was the other end, who decided to go and retire and finish his career there. So I think with that happening, we're going to see lots of suspensions for players doing minor instances of head contact, like we did last year. That's going to be even more the norm, and I think we're going to see more. I think we should extend the concussion layoff, and it might cause a good quality player to miss a couple of games during the final series, if not a grand final. We haven't seen it happen yet with the mandatory layoff. Someone miss a grand final for the concussion protocols, but it could happen this year, especially if they extend it out. Now, the headline that we won't see, but will happen, of course, in an alternate timeline, I'm predicting the headline we're not going to see is that Dustin Martin will join the Gold Coast. I think he will stay at Richmond unless the Gold Coast do really well at the end of the year and Richmond is still dwindling towards the bottom 4. I think then he could potentially leave for the last couple of years of his career. But are they going to be able to afford to keep everyone if they get him up there? He's going to be worth a lot of money. But I think Dustin Martin will recommit to the Tigers this year, and he's going to stay a Richmond player. But of course, it won't stop the media talking about it every week, because you will see it every single week. Where's Dusty going? Especially if Richmond have a poor start to the year. It's all going to be about Dustin Martin just about every week on the news. It'll be, the usual suspects, the Tom Morrises, the Mitch Clearys, who's that idiot who said he's going to leave every other year? Oh, Sam McClure. Yeah, Sam McClure. He's got about 6 months worth of Dustin Martin leaving content, I'm sure, in the bank. So, terrific news for him, but I think Dusty will stay at the Tigers. And I have no sources. This is me just making a prediction. It's a guess. That's all it is. Finally, to finish off today, who's going to be the grand final entertainment this year? I'm going to make a very big name call. I think there is a potential chance the AFL get Coldplay for this year's grand final. Now, hear me out. Coldplay, they're touring in Australia in November or late October. It would be an absolutely huge get. They've got some time free on their world tour during September, so you could potentially get them in to do the AFL grand final. It would probably cost a lot of money, like I'm talking a lot of money, but you could get them in. And I think that would be huge. Get Coldplay, get them to do a set at the MCG after the grand final like we had with the Killers a few years ago. That'd be huge. And if we don't get Coldplay, this could be the biggest grand final entertainment ever, and there's only one way you can sell it, and it's Taylor Swift. Now, if you get Taylor Swift, she's already sold out the MCG by herself. You could get her to come back with the premise of this will be bigger than your concert that you just played this year, or at the start of the year. She had 96,000 in the MCG at the start of the year. Grand final, guaranteed 100,000 people. Most of Australia, or you'll have 3 million people in Australia watching it live on TV. You will have the entire concert uploaded to the internet. It would be an unbelievably big deal for the AFL to get Taylor Swift, and it would probably make it the most watched grand final in history, let's be honest. You've seen what Taylor Swift has done for the NFL. If they could get her to be the entertainment for the AFL grand final, unbelievable scenes. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if they somehow manage to do it, and it probably will cost them, it'll be the most expensive grand final entertainment we've ever had. It'll probably be $100+ million to get her here, but it's probably worth the investment. Get her in, just do it. I mean, could you imagine? We've seen Jack Rewalt with the Killers on stage. Could you imagine, let's say Brisbane win the grand final this year. Could you imagine the Brisbane Lion players up there on the stage after the game with Taylor Swift singing Shake It Off, and then with the bloody Premiership Cup waving it around? It just writes itself. Anyway, that's all for me today. That is my predictions for 2024, the AFL season. There's lots of footy related ones in there. There's lots of silly related ones in there. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know yours in the comments below. And if you think I'm going to be right or wrong, I don't care, because it's a prediction. Anything can happen.